animal. Who can guess and I'm not going to give you a clue. It has something to do with something that happened this weekend. Who can guess which animal in the whole wide world has the strongest sense of smell? Does anyone want to guess?
I'm going to say the bear.
The bear is close. The bear is very close, but you're not close. Who else? This stunned me. I couldn't believe it. I looked it up to make sure it wasn't bogus. It's the turkey vulture. They have the best sense of smell because they have to detect an animal that's freshly dead. They don't eat rotten meat. So they have to, and they can detect a teeny little smell from a mile away. They get there and eat it before it decays. And they do not harm humans. In fact, just the opposite. They help us by eliminating bacteria and decay. Thank you. Go look for turkey vultures. They've been flying all year and they're out there today. Thank you.
So thank you, Connie, and cheers to Erin Davis, who knew the correct answer. Erin may have been the only one amongst us. And now we know something new. Thank you. You know, on my way here today, thinking of signs of spring, I saw a whole yard of new purple crocuses outside the LGBTQ+ center. So here's to that. Jim Bright, can you come up and introduce our visiting Rotarians and guests today? Thank you.
Thank you, President Sally, and hello to everybody in the room and on Zoom. We're pleased to have with us today the legendary Bob Hamill. Bob, great to have you with us. Bob is our 2020 Wilmington Rotary Toast honoree, a member of the Sports Hall of Fame here in Indiana, renowned author, renowned sports writer. So Bob, thank you for being with us. Also, we're pleased to have with us today the past president of the Brown County Rotary Club, Dwight Thompson. Dwight. And finally in the room, we have with us today a Global Grant Scholar for 2020-21, just back from Japan. Please welcome Clarice Cross. And accompanying Clarice today from their home in Brownsburg, Indiana, is Clarice's father, Doug Cross. Doug? And turn it over. I understand we have some terrific guests joining us in Zoom land today. Let's go. Let's hear from Joy Harder. Joy?
Hi, everyone in the room and on Zoom. We do have a few Zoom guests this afternoon. Jim Bright has a guest, Keith Weedman, welcome Keith, who is actually a member of the Columbus Rotary Club. So welcome, Keith. And then we have a guest of Jeff Richardson. We are pleased to have with us Brian Brace. Am I pronouncing that right? Am I maybe butchering it? Brace, sorry. Thank you, Sally. Brian is the director of the Indiana Association for IU Athletic Department, and he was also a 4-year varsity letterman on the IU track team. So let's take note of that. So welcome, Brian and Keith. And did I omit anyone? And I'm sorry if I did, but hopefully I didn't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Jim, and welcome all of you visiting Rotarians and guests. You know you're welcome back here anytime, any week on Tuesday, either on Zoom or here in person, now until further notice. So it does take a village, particularly to produce our hybrid meetings on Zoom and here in person. Michael Shermas, our producer, Alan Barker, our main troubleshooter / problem solver, and Joy Harder. The roundabout reporter for this month is Susie Graham. Thank you, Susie. Thanks to Connie for the reflection and to Art Omick for being our greeter. We have some significant birthdays this week. Hurrah. Raj Hadawi, I know you're there. March the 3rd, happy birthday. Also, you share a birthday with Diane Shoemaker, March the 3rd, one of our NAACP members. And then on March the 6th, Bob Salzberg. Happy birthday to all. And in the member anniversary category, this is the week of the Johns. John Hobson, 37 years, Bloomington Rotary. Congratulations. John Vanderzee, 12 years in our club, and John Zodi, 1 year back in our club, and we're working on documenting how many years you were in our club before. There's an issue with our database that Natalie and I are in contact with DACDB people about. So the week of the Johns. Oh, and by the way, next week we're inducting a new member named John. So we're continuing the trend. I want to thank everyone who volunteered last week at the Hoosier Hills Food Bank. We bagged a ton of cereal. I'm going to read your names. Please stand or give a shout on Zoom if you volunteered. Michael Shermus, you don't have to stand up, yay. Winston Schindel, Gil Souza, Ruth Boschkoff, Sarah Laughlin, Beth Savage, Owen Johnson, Art Omick, Steve Engel, Sally Gaskell, and the second shift was Chris Michael Morrison, Tina Swanson, Jim Bright, Ben Pearson, Cindy Needhart, Ashley Wesley, prospective Rotarian Teresa Clare and her 7th grade son, Liam, and 3 members of the Rotaract Club, John McCookie, Marin McClelland, and the current president, Lynn Tron. Thank you all so much for doing your service to Rotary and to Hoosier Hills. And especially thanks to Tina Swanson and Chris Michael Morrison, who stepped up this year to be the ringleaders. Hunger is not an option. March 10th is the deadline to apply for a district grant. So if you have a project in mind with a local nonprofit, please make sure that you meet that March 10th deadline. It's a pretty simple grant application. And if you have any questions about it, contact me or Sarah Laughlin or Von Welch. And then please do sign up also for this year's district grant project, which is Rotarians volunteering for the Lotus World Bazaar on April 1st and 2nd at Fairview School. That's Friday and Saturday. Looking forward to helping out with that. April 9th, right after April 1st and 2nd, is our district conference here at the IMU. The keynote will be by President Pamela Whitten of Indiana University. There will be many other terrific speakers. I learned this morning that Michael Shermus is going to be on a panel talking about how do you do hybrid meetings in this day and age. And of course, lots of opportunities to make new friends. And you'll make Jim Bright and me very happy if you don't wait till the last moment to register for the conference. Finally, Rotary Day at the Theater is Thursday, March 10th. That's a week from this Thursday for the Cardinal Stage production of The Mountaintop by Katori Hall. It's the grand reopening this Friday of the John Waldron Arts Center. The play will be at the Waldron. Tickets are pay what you will, anything from $0 on up. But please call the Cardinal Stage box office and tell them you're part of the Rotary group on March the 10th. And we'll all be able to sit together. I know that Charlotte Sitlow will be there that night with a friend, as will I, and I hope to see many others as well. Sarah Laughlin, yay, we're gonna have a Rotary night. Okay, that's all I got. Owen Johnson, over to you to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Sally. Our speaker today is an economist in the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. He joined the IU faculty, amazingly, more than 40 years ago. He must have been a toddler at the time. During that 40 years, he has also served as Director of State Relations, advisor to the President, and interim dean of the O'Neill School. He's been a member of the City of Bloomington Economic Development Commission and the editorial board of Public Budgeting and Finance. In the late 1990s, he served as chair of the Citizens Commission on Taxes, created by Governor Frank O'Bannon to formulate recommendations for improving the state and local tax system in Indiana. He has served as chairman of the Indiana State Board of Tax Commissioners, taxing work, I guess. He's been a consultant to the state of Indiana, Indiana Infrastructure Incorporated, U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. Department of Transportation, and the President's Commission on Aviation Safety. 11 years ago, at the urging of faculty colleagues, I applied to be faculty athletic representative at IU, the person who represents the Bloomington faculty on matters dealing with intercollegiate athletics, including issues related to institutional control, academic integrity, and rules compliance. Bill Perkins of our club also served in that role. I didn't get the position. Our speaker today did. I'm glad because I have seen the amount of energy, hard work, and responsibility he brings to that job in his commitment to the athletics faculty, the Big Ten, and the NCAA. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to our speaker today, Kurt Zorn.
Thanks, Owen. I did not realize that you were a candidate at the same time. We did serve on the athletic committee, Owen and I did, for a while. So you want me to go like this? All right. So Owen mentioned that the faculty athletics represents Indiana University to the Big Ten Conference and also to the NCAA. I've been fortunate to serve on a few NCAA commissions or committees, the Committee on Academics, the Committee on Medical Safety, and I don't know, it's called CMAS, but medical safeguards and so forth. I currently am the president of 1A FAR, which is the FAR group for the FBS conferences, 10 conferences, Power 5, and then what we call the Group 5. And in that role, I serve as a member of the D1 Council of the NCAA. The reason I'm telling you this is not to brag, but to sort of give you some background of my perspective that's behind this presentation. So I'll admit that this is going to be a little provocative possibly, but I don't really care. So what does the future hold for the NCAA? This is me looking into my crystal ball. So that's it, just me, okay? So right now, there's some basic questions many are asking about the NCAA. The NCAA faces an existential crisis. Does your organization have meaning or purpose today? Assuming the NCAA has a purpose, can it articulate that purpose? And finally, if the NCAA can clearly articulate its meaning or purpose, can it recreate itself to effectively support and further that meaning or purpose? Are we okay? Sure.
Try to move the gallery.
Oh, so they can see the
Yeah,
full
so you can see the
slides.
full slide.
Okay, great. All right. So first, to give a little context. So the question is, how did we get here? All right. And I want to give credit to some presentations that were made in my group's webinar presentations. We had a meeting in September of 2021. So it's Amy Perko, who's the chair of the executive director of the Knight Commission, and Frank Messina, who's on my board of the 1A FAR. So I want to give proper citation. I don't want to get academic misconduct here, right? So it can be argued things began to unravel with the Supreme Court's ruling in the NCAA versus the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma. Although the real beginning probably occurred in 1979 with the formation of the College Football Association. The CFA was formed by a number of universities. Many of today's powerful football schools were part of this association to, quote, navigate the blossoming world of television. Quaint, isn't that? So the NCAA's stance at that time was to, quote, threaten sanctions against schools that sought better deals. The NCAA's stance then was eerily similar to that it has taken regarding many changes in the intervening years. It can be argued that this reactive rather than proactive stance over the years has put us in the position we are in today. The NCAA has either been resistant to change or unable to adapt quickly enough to change, and I'll leave it to you to decide which you think is the case. The majority opinion is the NCAA's television deal was a restraint of trade. The CFA started brokering football deals. The Bowl Championship Series was introduced in 1998, and the college playoff began in 2014. And now we're talking about expanding that playoff from 4 to 12 teams. These changes, along with the growth and popularity of the NCAA's March Madness, has resulted in an explosion of revenue, largely from the media broadcast rights. All right, so I just wanted to provide the site for the next slide, set of slides, Amy Perko, CEO of the Knight Commission. All right, so quickly on this, we have, it looks a little busy, but basically shows there are 130 FBS football institutions, and $460 million comes to those institutions from the college playoff, and $343 million comes from the NCAA, all right? And 60+ million of that is attributable to counting the sport of FBS football in the calculation. So football reigns big in the revenue model, all right? And basically this slide shows how the money has changed over that period of time. So you can see 2005, we're talking about a measly $570 million, and the projections for 2020 at the time were 2.7, almost $2.8 billion. That's annual money, right? So we're talking about lots of dough, right? But the important part is the distribution of these revenues is not fairly equal, let's put it that way, right? Depends where you're coming from, right? If you're in the A5, the autonomy 5 or the power 5, you kind of like the distribution. But you can see that the revenues from only 2 major sources for the Power 5 conferences comes from media contracts, conference network revenues, postseason football, and so forth, right? Lots of money comes from those media sources, all right? So in 2018, Power 5 public institutions received 38% of their total athletic budgets from the NCAA and conference distributions, compared to 10% for a group of 5 institutions. This is all within the football bowl part of the football, right? 20% comes from ticket sales compared to 6% in the 23 from donor contributions compared with 11% for the group of 5. You may ask, where does the group of 5 get its money? The group of 5 received 22% of their budget from student fees and 39% of their budget from institutional or government support, while the Power 5 did not significantly tap these 2 sources of revenue at all. Where did all this revenue go? Well, you can see that a lot of it went to football coaches' salaries, which have grown significantly and faster than total athletic expenses. And total athletic expenses have increased significantly faster than total academic spending. See, this gives you a feel for how things are moving along, right? And this gives you an idea of the football coach and assistant coach athletic expenses, academic spending. So, some observations. Lots of money is being generated by football, but most of it goes to a small number of institutions. The NCAA provides all the infrastructure for football, regulation, punishment, all that kind of stuff, but does not control the money of the championships. Kind of an odd arrangement as far as I'm concerned. Also, as is often the custom, expenses often rise to meet revenue. This has been the case regarding coaches' salaries, facilities, student support, etc. But the arms race is unfair even among FBS schools, the Power Five, the Group Five. There are extreme inequities. Budgets among FBS institutions range from $16 million total to $220 million. It's a fairly significant difference. So far, Group of Five institutions have tried to keep pace the best they can, and they, of course, are doing it through student fees and institutional support. The question is whether institutional support is sustainable given the looming high school demographic shift. If you're not in higher education right now, that's something that we're all talking about. How are we going to get students, enough students to come to our respective institutions? Attracting students will become more challenging, especially at non-flagship public institutions. For example, just this year, Ball State saw an 8% drop in beginner students in fall of 2021, while IUB saw a more than 20% increase over 2020. So there are going to be significant differences. Today's challenges. You may have heard of the Alston case. This is basically the issue of inequity of football and basketball players generating revenue, but not getting their fair share. Some people talk about pay for play to take care of that problem. We did have a Supreme Court decision, which is going to make constraints on student athlete compensation very difficult going forward. I'm not going to go into detail there, but if you want some amusing reading, read that decision and read Justice Kavanaugh's specific decision. NIL, name, image, and likeness. You may have heard of this. This is already a thing in the NCAA. We're allowing this. This leads to inequity of institutions benefiting. The issue is inequity of institutions benefiting, but student athletes couldn't. All right. And also the inequity between regular students who can sell their name and image and likeness. So somebody in Jacobs School can sell their name and image and likeness, but somebody that's in the intercollegiate athletic department cannot. All right. So the NCAA changed rules for the NIL July 1st, 2021. Since then, it's become the wild, wild west. It's crazy, folks. NCAA President Mark Emmert was quoted in the Sports Business Journal saying, quote, "It's very clear to me, and I think anybody involved, that what's going on in the NIL space is very different than the spirit of NIL when it was first discussed. A lot of people are concerned about it and they're disturbed by it and anxious about what is going to happen," unquote. The NCAA and President Emmert keep looking for relief from Congress. Again, a quote, "It's a tenuous balance and it can't last very long. If the membership doesn't act, others on the legal and political front will. It's far better for us to decide our own future. Having said that, we need Congress to act with us to change the legal environment. We've got multiple models all over the country with no one providing any enforcement at the state level. They're not enforcing their own laws," unquote. He's basically referring to the states coming up with all their individual NIL legislation. But the NCAA isn't even enforcing its own interim rules regarding NIL. The interim rules, we put up some guardrails. We basically said athletes can't be compensated for performance or enrollment. In other words, you can't entice people to come. You can't recruit people with NIL, and that the athlete has to do something in return for the NIL. There has to be a quid pro quo. That reminds me of the former president we had, right? Sorry. I should stay away from those things. My apologies. I just can't help it sometimes. Also, institutions cannot arrange NIL deals themselves. Those are sort of the interim rules. Well, guess what? The NCAA is missing in action when it comes to this. Now, the Board of Governors of the NCAA has asked the D1 Council, that group that I serve on, to consider how NIL is affecting student athletes, including its influence on student school choice and transfer and the impact on academics and student mental health, and recommend any adjustments that may make sense given this information. And by the way, they asked this last week, and they want an initial report in April. It's an easy thing to do. All right, I'm being a little sarcastic, but like I said, I'm going to be a little provocative. We also have gender equity review. You might remember last year, the men's and women's basketball tournament at the NCAA raised a bunch of gender issues. So guess what? The NCAA is now undertaking a thorough gender equity review, long overdue. And there are some significant changes occurring in that space. We also have the National Labor Relations Board advisory. I'm a little ahead of myself. Advisory that said unionization and collective bargaining should be allowed to offset the unfair and equitable working conditions for student athletes. They're basically saying student athletes are employees. I don't agree with that. I am a faculty member, and I do believe that they're here as students who are also athletes. Another quaint idea. January, we changed the constitution of the NCAA, which now clearly separates Division I, II, and III. I frankly didn't know they weren't clearly separated, but now they are. They're much different, by the way. And subsequent to that, we have now what's called the D1 Transformation Committee at work. There are 21 members to that. And we do have 2 FARs, which is nice because usually FARs don't get put on these because, why would somebody with an academic background and a mindset be included? Again, a little snarky comment on my part. Under consideration is subdividing schools in Division I. If you don't know, Division I consists of like 352 institutions. Some have no football and some are Alabama. And they're all treated the same in Division I. Kind of crazy. We're also looking at the status of automatic qualifiers for postseason competitions, which may not mean much to you, but means a lot to conference commissioners, health and safety initiatives and so forth. So my question is, will the NCAA be able to effectively respond to these challenges? That's a long list of pretty significant challenges. Remember, this is the group that kind of want to put roadblocks up all along the way and not address things, kind of push the thing down the road. Well, I think this is unlikely because we have an unwieldy structure. They've lost their focus, they've lost the narrative, and the threat of litigation has led to paralysis. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. The unwieldy structure, we have 1,108 colleges and universities in the NCAA. Division I has 350 or 352 members in 3 subdivisions. The FBS, which I've been talking about a fair amount, has 130 members. The FCS, which is another football, but that's the football championship, has 124, and then 96 to have non-football. The NCAA has been slow to respond, and it loves basically to do things incrementally. All right. So when I say it's lost its focus and its narrative, during the time I've been associated with the NCAA, its focus seems to have been on competition and revenue with academics and student welfare as almost an afterthought. Admittedly, this is an overstatement, but I think there's truth in it. We've increased compensation for coaches, administrators, spent lavishly on facilities. These are fixed costs basically, so now we are addicted to the big bucks. We failed to keep our focus on the student athlete, the collegiate model, academics, and student athlete physical and mental well-being. We tend to give lip service to those things, but do we really invest in them? And I'll just point out, the D1 Council has 38 members and only 2 seats are guaranteed for FARs. Currently, there are 22 ADs, athletic directors, 7 commissioners, and 5 senior women administrators. You'd think if you thought academics was important, you'd give a little bit more central focus to the FAR. He may be saying, well, you're just, trying to support yourself and elevate yourself. Well, yeah, because I think we have something to bring to the table. It's also become an unwieldy regulatory body, and the NCAA failed to adapt and adjust to the changing landscape that I talked earlier about from 1984 on. In my 10 plus years of service as FAR, I would characterize the NCAA as an organization that's reactive, not proactive. So I don't think it's going to be able to respond to these things very well. All right. Threat of litigation has led to paralysis. Just point out a few things. We had Committee on Academics and revisions in the process of handling academic misconduct. We did a lot of good things there. And then we give deference to the campus process. And basically, you get University of North Carolina. I don't have enough time to go into details there, but look it up. University of North Carolina was embarrassing and is embarrassing. If I was a faculty member at UNC, I would be ashamed the way the administration addressed things. We have, like I said, the UNC fiasco. We have the transfer working group, which took painfully long period of time to come to decision on how to do things. We have the transfer portal that came out of that. The NCAA said they were going to educate students before they went into the transfer portal. They're not doing any education. So kids are going into the transfer portal thinking that they're going to get picked up. Once they enter, they lose their scholarship at their institution. They think they're going to get picked up, and that doesn't always happen. So we have students who are going in who had money to study and to play at one institution. They go in thinking they're going to get more playing time. They lose their scholarship. And a lot of these kids in the football and basketball area can't afford college on their own. So then they no longer in college. Why don't we educate the students first? NIL, it took years to seriously address the issue, despite many examples of the inequities. Once we began discussing, we ended up taking so long, we effectively surrendered the space to others. States have basically said, the NCAA is not going to do anything, we're going to do it. Even with the interim policy, which is minimal, the NCAA is basically missing in action. We've raised questions about why some institutions are not adhering to the policy. Memphis is one of those. BYU is another one. And the response was, well, it's up to the individual campus to figure it out. That's the NCAA's response. The argument is, there are a wide variety of state laws, so the NCAA is unable to govern in that space any longer or provide good guidance. Perhaps this is a smart, deliberate strategy to basically say, hey, things are so wild that we can't control it, so we need federal intervention. I don't know about you, I'm not sure that the feds can get their act together enough to intervene, so I think I'd be a little bit more proactive. Again, the NCAA is losing the narrative. Early results are the sky didn't fall due to NIL, all right? But there are some bad actors out there that need some control. We need to do something other than just say, leave it up to the campuses. The National Labor Relationship Board situation is still concerning. There's some legislation at the federal level to include public institutions. Now the NLRB can only include private institutions. And then we have that Alston case. And the Alston case, again, in the interest of time, I'll skip it over, but read that. And Kavanaugh's concurring opinion went much further than the opinion signed by the majority. By the way, the overall vote was unanimous. How many times do you see the Supreme Court with unanimity? But Kavanaugh's opinion is scary because it sets up a roadmap for challenges to the NCAA rulemaking under antitrust laws. And you know what the response has basically been? Well, it was only Kavanaugh's opinion, so we don't have to pay much attention to it. Don't get nervous about it. I think that, I'm not an attorney, but I think that's being a little bit Pollyannish. So we've got salvation in sight, right? Or maybe there's a question. We have the Constitutional Review Initiative, Division I Transformation Committee. It's a journey that's going to be a bold change. That's what we've heard. I'll be very honest with you. I've been underimpressed so far with the Transformation Committee. Believe me, it's chaired by two very talented people, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and Julie Cromer, who used to be senior women administrator here, but now is at Ohio, I think, or Miami, is the AD. They're very talented, but when you get into a room with all the, remember, it's a diverse group of people, D1, Division I representatives, there are people out there that don't want to change because they get a little bit of money and they're afraid they're not going to get any money. So I'm not terribly optimistic about bold change occurring, right? So what lies ahead? Well, it's pretty clear the current model is financially unstable, even without significant changes that may be forced by pending lawsuits. In 2018, 2019, only 25 departments in D1, Division I, were in the black financially, and all were in Power 5 conferences. 25. All right? So what does the future portend? And I basically say it's a crystal ball, or maybe if you remember, if you're as old as I, the magic ball, right? Magic 8-ball. I used to love those things. All right? So I think there are 4 scenarios. The NCAA continues to limp into the future. Incremental change. Reactive instead of proactive. Power 5 breaks away. That's something that was discussed 5 or 6 years ago before the autonomy conference was conferences was formed. There could be different variations on this theme, a complete break, a partial break, et cetera. The problem with that is the litigation's not going to go away. It'll just follow the breakaway institutions because they're the ones that have all the money. Third option, the NCAA implodes under the weight of all the external forces. I frankly think that's the most likely scenario in the long run, personally. The NCAA has lost its voice, its credibility is challenged regularly. Its leadership is toxic when on Capitol Hill. So that leads us to the fourth option, which is to be proactive. If you believe option 3 is likely, then shouldn't you get on with envisioning a new model? Of course, that's what we're supposedly doing with the transformation model, but I'm not sure that that's going to give us the bold change we need. So if we had radical reform, here's what I would suggest should be our guiding principles. The centrality of academics and student welfare. So that equates to FARs, academic directors, and student athletes having a much stronger voice in governance matters, much more than current. We also could emulate what's the big, I call the baseball model on both football and basketball, which basically means that you decide as a student athlete that you go into minor leagues out of high school, or you come to an institution for at least 3 years before you go and get drafted. You also could require the student athlete to acknowledge that they are students first and athletes second. That would eliminate the pay for play and employee arguments. You could establish guiding principles for the new NCAA and the expectations of membership. In other words, basically say this is what you have to do to be a member. And if you don't want to be a member under these rules, then you're not welcome to the club. These are Pollyannish, I agree. But what the heck? Throw them out there. And basically, members should be subject to punishment sanctioned by their peers and give up their rights to sue. Because that's the problem right now. The NCAA tries to do something, the institution sues them, and then nothing happens. And I took much too long, so sorry, but there's a lot to cover. So, any questions?
How about time for one question? I know Owen's got a question.
How do you think IU will come out?
How do I think IU will come out?
of this?
Financially, IU will be challenged because it is in the bottom third financially of the Big Ten. So it's going to continue to be challenged. But in terms of the focus on student athlete academics and mental and physical well-being, under the leadership of Fred Glass and now Scott Dolson, we've done a really good job in that space. My job as FAR has been easy relative to some other places because those are the things I am supposed to advocate for, and I've always had good cooperation from the leadership in the athletic department. So I'm optimistic on that side. The financial side is going to be a challenge.
Okay. My question is there any organization that could push the academic side of our academies and turn them back into educational institutions that can compete with the athletic?
Well, Charlotte,
Empire.
that's a good question. Ultimately, the NCAA is an organization of the member institutions, and the people who are in charge are the presidents and chancellors at the university. So getting them to change their focus a little bit and maybe get a little bit more involved to encourage academics is important. Of course, they're very busy people, so it's hard for them to give a lot of bandwidth to that issue.
Kurt, thank you so much for sharing your unique insights into this really important topic for the university and for the community. In honor of your presentation today, we will be making a donation to Cardinal Stage. Next week, we're back here in the Frangipani room and on Zoom. We're going to have a club forum. Michael, can you please share the four-way test graphic? And we will close our meeting by reciting the four-way test +1 of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, it's fun.